Welcome back, my friends. Tonight we're going to be returning to the horrors of the body, looking at more films with fantastic depictions of just the worst things you could possibly think of. This is part 2 in a series of videos. You should check out the other one first if you want. Technically, you don't have to have seen it to be watching this one, but if you like this one, go watch that one too, because it's also good. But before we go any further, I would like to thank Raycon for sponsoring today's video. Raycon's having a summer sale, and I'm going to be telling you how to use my link to get 15% off. You've probably heard of Raycon already. At this point, who hasn't, right? But in case you haven't, I'm going to need you to take everything that you thought you knew about earbuds and just toss it into the burning pits of hell. Because Raycon just upgraded their everyday earbuds and they have a ton of cool new features that I was kind of shocked by. I'm a weird person to market these to. Earbuds have always been kind of hit or miss for me. The price tag is off-putting, the sound can often be muffled or distorted, and infuriatingly, they won't ever stay in my ears. I go on walks and runs on a near daily basis, and I listen to music or my favorite YouTubers, but wireless earbuds always seem to fall out of my ears. They just feel like they're more hassle than what they're worth. That is, until I started using these. At less than half the price of similar products from leading competitors, Raycon's everyday earbuds have spectacularly clean sound with a variety of options for optimizing audio quality for your device and customizing your sound to your preferences. With both noise cancellation and awareness modes, you can block out unwanted noise and make sure that you stay aware of your surroundings. The upgraded pair of Raycons are also weatherproof, which is useful for when you're diving into the ocean seeking Cthulhu, but you want to listen to Alex G at the same time. These things also charge surprisingly quickly and have a ton of battery life. When fully charged, you're getting up to 8 hours of listening time. Plus, the fun little storage case that it comes in charges your earbuds and holds an additional 32 hours of battery. There are tons of colors and cool styles to choose from. These ones I've got here are black with a granite case. I also have pastel purple with a space theme case, which is really cool. One of my personal favorite features of these earbuds is that you can control them with a single tap. You end up looking like Tony Stark as you tap or slide your finger across the earbud to change the volume, or skip and restart your music, or even answer your phone with ease and incredible convenience. Obtaining these trinkets will get you one pair of Raycon everyday wireless earbuds, plus silicone gel tips and a charging case for on-the-go charging, plus one charging cable cord. Tune out the extra noise with Raycon. Click the link in the description or go to buyraycon.com/legion to save 15% on the everyday earbuds. Back to the video. A group of men frantically attempt to resuscitate their fallen comrade Norris, who has just collapsed, seemingly from a sudden heart attack. The tension is palpable as they prepare the defibrillator. When it finally discharges, the jolt does not restart Norris's heart, but instead, it triggers something far worse. His chest explodes outward in a grotesque yawn of flesh, ribs splaying apart like the jaws of some nightmarish creature. From the gaping maw, a writhing, serrated mass of teeth and tendrils lash out, snapping at the hands of the man trying to save him. A monstrous contradiction of biology. There are multiple mouths, and I must scream, "Ah!" Tendrils, strange appendages, whip violently, and the men stagger back. Their screams raw with disbelief as this violation of the natural order, this thing, does not kill. It unmakes, twisting the human form into something alien and predatory. The damage is done. The image of Norris's split open torso, the wet glistening of exposed viscera, and the inhuman thing that now wears his skin lingers like a waking nightmare. And to be honest, that is just the beginning of some of the gnarliest practical effects you'll ever see. John Carpenter's The Thing from 1982 blends visceral body horror with psychological dread to create an experience that lingers long after the credits roll. I know I say that about a ton of movies, but you'll notice I only talk about good movies, and good movies tend to stick with you. So, how is that my fault? Like the best body horror often does, The Thing attacks the very idea of humanity through grotesque physical transformations, suffocating paranoia, and the existential terror of identity loss. Based on the 1938 John W. Campbell Jr. novella Who Goes There, it tells the story of a group of American researchers in Antarctica who encounter the titular Thing, an extraterrestrial life form that assimilates, then imitates other organisms. The group is overcome by paranoia and conflict as they learn that they can no longer trust each other and that any of them could be the Thing. The movie is a nightmare of the body turned against itself. The film's infamous practical effects, designed by Rob Bottin, depict transformations that are not just shocking, but deeply unnatural. The Thing doesn't kill its victims outright. It consumes and replicates them in ways that defy biology. The twisted, screaming faces of assimilated victims, the way the Thing's limbs detach and move independently. These mutations aren't only disturbing because they're graphic, they're disturbing because they suggest that the human form is fragile and easily corrupted. The Thing erases people, wearing their bodies like ill-fitting suits. Beyond the physical horror, the Thing thrives on psychological terror. The Antarctic setting isolates the characters, trapping them with an enemy they don't understand. Unlike many traditional monsters, the Thing hides in plain sight, wearing the faces of friends and comrades. This creates an atmosphere of awful tension, where every glance, every hesitation becomes suspect. There's a scene where they realize that people who have been assimilated have mutated blood, and that mutated blood will react to heat. So they draw blood from each person and test it with heat to see if it reacts. Then the camera lingers on their faces, sweating, their bodies twitching, their eyes darting around. And when the Thing is revealed in one of them, the reaction isn't just fear, it's betrayal. We are forced to question who is human and who isn't, making even the act of survival a brutal and dehumanizing process. And by the end of it, the survivors are as dangerous to each other as the Thing itself. The first hit sends Bill sprawling, his knees hitting the floor with a wet smack. The second splits his lip, copper flooding his tongue. The third, the fourth, the fifth, they blur together, each impact a white-hot burst of pain. His body jerks with every blow, his ribs screaming, his vision flickering in and out like a failing light bulb. Then Ted's hands are on him again. They're not fists this time, they're slimier, softer, malleable, digging into Bill's stomach, pressing in like he's testing the ripeness of fruit. Bill gasps, feeling the pressure, the wrongness of fingers pushing into him, not just against him. Then Ted starts kissing him, attempting to meld their faces together, and Bill moves before he thinks. His hand shoots out, not to push Ted away, but in. Fingers plunge beneath Ted, and the resistance is all wrong. Not muscle and bone, but something soft, yielding, like sinking into wet jello. Ted's eyes widen, his grin faltering. Bill pushes deeper, and Ted's body shudders, his skin rippling like water disturbed by a stone. Ted's eyes pop out as fingers push them out and grab onto the mask of his hideous face. And then Bill pulls. Ted's flesh doesn't tear or rip, it peels back in glistening ribbons, his insides becoming outsides in a grotesque inversion. His scream is cut short as his throat collapses inward, his body twisting, folding like a glove turned inside out. The rest of the cult members recoil, their hungry murmurs turning to shouts of alarm. Ted doesn't die like a man. He dies like a thing, his form unraveling until what's left is a wet, twitching mass of exposed viscera pulsing weakly on the floor. The remains look suspiciously like crawling worms. Brian Usna's society is a open wound of a film that peels back the veneer of privilege to reveal a raw and pulsing truth beneath. On the surface, it plays almost exactly like a typical 80s coming-of-age film. Sun-drenched Beverly Hills mansions and suspiciously perfect smiles, and everyone's really cheery. But as the protagonist discovers, the horror is not an external monster. It's the realization that the people around him, the people who claim to be his family, his friends, his lovers, they aren't just different than him. They are hungry. And you are not a person to them. Your food. In my opinion, society has very clear political messages in how it weaponizes body horror to expose a literal consumption of the lower class by the upper 1%. And it isn't really a metaphorical exploitation either. It's physical, visceral, happening right beneath our noses. Bill's growing alienation mirrors my own discomfort in a world where wealth doesn't just separate people, it transforms the privileged and the disadvantaged into something else. Their perfect teeth, flawless skin, too smooth manners, they seem like signs of an imagined superiority, but also of something far more disturbing. The markers of predators who have learned to wear human faces a little too well. While I found this movie to be a little bit of a slow burn, the crescendo at the end is well worth the pacing as tension creeps into frame, almost like the one scene in this movie where the boom mic shadow creeps into frame. The insane ending, the infamous shunting sequence where the film's social commentary erupts into one of the most disturbing body horror spectacles ever committed to film. And as Bill is dragged into the ritual, what unfolds is a violent, grotesque parody of high society. The way the elite's bodies merge and contort. Limbs don't just break, they reconfigure, folding into new, impossible shapes, as the wealthy literally absorb those that they see as beneath them. The wet sounds of flesh merging, the ecstatic expressions on the participants' faces, the way the victims aren't just killed, but incorporated. It's class warfare made almost hilariously literal. The final brilliant cruelty of society is that even when Bill fights back, even when he turns the tables in the glorious moment where he literally turns Ted inside out, nothing really changes. The system remains, the wealthy still feast, the horror continues just out of sight. Because that's how society works. A machine that keeps running generation after generation, consuming whatever or whoever gets caught in its malevolent gears. The film has an unwillingness to offer easy answers or cathartic victories. Like Bill, we're left only with the sickening knowledge of how the world really works and the understanding that knowing changes nothing. And merely 3 decades later, in an age of ever-widening wealth gaps and increasingly blatant elite excess, the film starts to feel, to me, like a weird adaptation of Old John's enduring essay, A Modest Proposal for Preventing the Children of Poor People from Being a Burden to Their Parents or Country and from Making Them Beneficial to the Public. What a mouthful of cock. Henry's fingers tremble around the scissors. The room presses in, the walls sweating, air thick with the sour stench of the thing's damp bandages. Something between rotten milk and vomit. It whimpers, a wet, clicking sound from somewhere deep in its malformed throat. The bandages, yellowed with seepage, cling stubbornly to its body, as if afraid of what they've been holding in. The first cut is hesitant. The fabric splits with a sound like tearing meat. Beneath the gauze, there is no skin, only pulsing, glistening, wet intestines coiled too loosely, a stomach sack shuddering with each stunted breath, ropes of muscle twitching in open air. The thing convulses as the last strips fall away, its organs shifting unnaturally, threatening to spill out from its frame. A gasp slips from its lipless mouth, a choked rattle, the sound of fluid in a drowning lung. Henry's breath comes in jagged bursts. The scissors hover, and then, in one jerking motion, he plunges them into the slick mass of the child's exposed gut. The wound weeps, a thick ooze that bubbles up in sluggish waves, coating the creature's trembling form. The light bulb overhead flares violently, once, twice, casting stuttering shadows that stretch and twist, and with each flicker the child expands, its head growing to massive proportions. This scene makes Psycho look like a children's film. David Lynch's Eraserhead feels like a living nightmare, one that pulses and breathes in its own diseased rhythm. From its opening frames with a grotesque floating head in space and sperm-like creatures swimming through the void, to the haunting song sung by the woman in the radiator, a film about what grows inside of us, what we create, what we're forced to care for. The movie's industrial wasteland setting becomes a kind of externalized womb, all hissing pipes and clanking machinery, where Henry Spencer stumbles through his own personal hell of fatherhood. The film's sound design in particular deserves special mention, in my opinion, for its ability to induce nausea. The constant industrial drones, the baby's terrible, wet wailing. When I watch it, it gets under my skin, emulating the film's themes of bodily invasion on a sensory level. The body becomes an unreliable vessel, threatening constantly to betray us. I adore every aspect of this film, so much so that I'm keeping my description here kind of intentionally vague, because I already made an entire video about this movie and how it fits into Lynch's filmography. A video that did so poorly that I am bringing it up again in this, an entirely separate video, to encourage you to go watch it, please. Please. I think it's one of my best videos, and I don't know, it sucks that it hasn't found a home with my audience yet. Go watch it after this one, if you want. A screen flickers with faded light, a serene glimpse at seagulls at the beach. You can almost taste the salt in the wind. And then we see it. Mr. Tusk. This man was sewn into a walrus costume made of human skin with tusks bolted to his skull and conditioned to think and behave like a walrus. While this is an absolutely insane fucking premise, this scene in particular really drives home how upsetting this transformation is. The walrus's unsettlingly human eyes are wide as drool drips down his cut and ruined tongue. He wails in agony, the bruised and hastily stitched together flesh imprisoning his broken body, quivering as he tries to yell out. His captor and tormentor enters the room with a maniacal grin and yells back at the writhing creature. "Ahoy, matey!" He picks up a dangling remote control and says, "Fish must learn how to swim before pressing the button." This causes the chain collar around Mr. Tusk's neck to pull taut and rip him off the rock and into the water tank that he is held captive inside, forcing him to thrash around as water splashes in his face to keep him from drowning. The man watches from above, yelling encouragingly. Mr. Tusk starts to sink to let himself start drowning. Certainly the madman above would put a stop to this to prevent a death, right? Then he sees the flesh heap in the depths below, the body of the last victim, with tusks bolted onto its skull's face. Guys, this movie is insane. Kevin Smith's movie Tusk begins as a dark comedy and then slowly and deliberately curdles into something so unsettling that even though the premise is just like completely ridiculous, it makes me feel sick watching it, like in my stomach. What starts as a podcast host's ill-advised trip to interview an eccentric seafarer becomes a grotesque meditation on identity, violation, and the terrifying malleability of the human form. You might notice common themes throughout a lot of body horror. Tusk lingers in the slow, irreversible process of transformation, making its audience complicit in every stitch, every cut, every irreversible step towards becoming something other than human. What makes this weird movie so profoundly disturbing isn't just the physicality of our protagonist Wallace's new form, but what remains of the man inside. The walrus mask doesn't fully obscure his face. We see his human eyes, wide, blinking. They dart frantically, searching for some escape that no longer exists. His attempts to speak produce only wet barking noises. His tongue is swollen and cut. When his captor Howard tosses him a fish and Wallace's body instinctively lunges towards it, that's when the true horror sets in. The man inside is still present, but his humanity is being overwritten piece by piece. His hunger, his movements, even his vocalizations are no longer his to control. And the film's bleakest insights come from the final moment, where Wallace, now fully adjusted to his new existence, is displayed in a zoo enclosure. And that's when we realize that the transformation was not the end of the horror, but merely the beginning of a new kind of suffering, one where the victim is aware enough to understand what is being done to them, but completely powerless to stop it. According to the movie's own internal logic, crying is what separates humans from animals. And in the zoo, in that final moment, we see Mr. Tusk cry. Powerful stuff. But in context, the whole setup of the movie is that Wallace is a huge asshole who capitalizes on people who have had horrible things happen to them, and he monetizes the suffering of real people. So, I feel like part of the message of the movie is that he maybe deserved it a little or was getting a taste of his own medicine. I don't know. But who knew that Silent Bob had such a twisted mind? I'm just kidding. We all knew that. Happy Pride Month. It is now time to talk about I Saw the TV Glow. Aesthetically and thematically, one of my favorite movies from 2024. If you haven't already, you should totally watch my video essay from last year about this very movie. Cracked lips and a sunken, hollow face. Owen has been working at the same place since a teenager and still exists there in a weird limbo. Their best friend has gone, and the world around them, despite being so familiar and thick with the suffocating feeling of nostalgia, is somehow hostile and alien. Owen works at an arcade movie theater hybrid, and tonight, one of the kids is having a birthday party. The entire film's inherent wrongness and deep-seated evil has been chasing and beating Owen over and over. And it's all led up to this moment at this birthday. Coworkers begin aggressively singing Happy Birthday, a celebration of the passage of time. Time marches on in a life spent scared and immobile. There's nothing sadder than wasted potential. Owen feels the weight of everything now, and for the first time in the entire film, expresses actual strong emotion, screaming, "Somebody help me, I'm dying." Like a light switch turned off, all the coworkers and children suddenly stop moving. The light rushes out of them as Owen crouches into a corner, still yelling. But the world, it seems, has become almost like a dollhouse, with Owen being the only real human inside. Then Owen starts apologizing, barely able to breathe, choking, "Sorry, ignore me," stumbling to the ground before screaming and calling for mom. Unfortunately, Owen, your mom's been dead for quite a while now. We literally saw this happen in the movie. You were there. While this movie isn't a straightforward horror in the usual sense, at least in my opinion, the body horror element is strong enough that I'm including it. Plus, I just love an excuse to talk about this movie again. A horror film about repression of the self. In this context, a queer teenager growing up without even having the language to express themselves and never actually discovering themselves until the very end. In fact, the movie actually could be read as having a positive ending, the thematic element being there is always time to take back control over your life. Owen narrates some of their life to us and has a very interesting line of dialogue. But some nights, when I was working late at the movie theater, I found myself wondering, what if Maddie was right? What if she had been telling the truth? What if I really was someone else? Someone beautiful and powerful, buried alive and suffocating to death, very far away on the other side of the television screen. You want your movies to have a happy ending, obviously, but this one kind of ends on a pretty horribly depressing note. We can imagine that Owen saw who they really were in that static and later buried themselves alive. Hell, we're almost led to make that conclusion, but we don't get to see it. And for us, the audience, it doesn't matter. You're so uncomfortable in your own skin that you want to claw it off. So if the ending leaves us off where it seems like it leaves us off, it's terribly sad, but also a lesson to the audience, almost probably intended to be like an allegory. Owen's parents died. Owen's friends left. The people around Owen didn't care. Even as much as they did care, the battle is over something so much more important, because ultimately no one else knows where you're going. And while you have agency in your life, you need to use it. If you feel lost, scattered, hopeless, helpless, don't give in. There is great power in this idea. And I don't know, I think it's people need to watch this movie. The director, Jane, said in a profile with The New Yorker, TV Glow is about something I think a lot of trans people understand. The tension between the space that you exist within, which feels like home, and the simultaneous terror and liberation of understanding that that space might not be able to hold you in your true form. I think many people, even if they are sympathetic to narratives of biological family estrangement, still want to believe in resolution or restorative, reparative work. And I think that this does a disservice to queer people who are not in control of whether that work can be done. I really like that quote. And to me, what that means, whether in the context of the movie or in a broader context, that you cannot wait for your family or your friends to accept you. Because we're all, constantly, we're running out of time. Time is ticking, right? It is precious, and you don't owe them your patience or understanding, especially when they extend none of that same courtesy towards you. What you do owe is it to yourself and your well-being, to self-actualize, because only then can you be, at least moderately free. Anyways, look at that. We finally managed to end a video on a more uplifting note. And it only happened because I dug up the ghost of my 20-year-old self's previous scripts. Yay! Huge thank you to the enablers over on Patreon. Let me know of any other body horror movies I should cover, and also let me know if there are any other underappreciated genres I could talk about. I really want to make a video on dark fantasy, but I don't know if y'all would watch that. Let me know. We are Legion. See you in the next transmission. Huge thank you to patrons Kira, AJ, Dark Beast, Blackest Bile, Coyote, Cuba, Bat Noise, Phoenix, Hadley, Bees, Joy, Amelia, Boris, Panflute, Thomas, Audrey, Justin, Lou, Ray, ZK, Tom, Dave, Elkie, Stardrop, Nude, George, Joseph, and Mr. Fox.